Just waiting for the connection. All right, we are live with the Friday FARcast. How was everybody out there? And today, my guest is Mr. RA Castaldo, and Ra is pretty interesting character. He's if number one, he's a father, but more importantly, well, maybe not more importantly, but just as importantly, he's a link to the past in a way that I think is really, really important. Ra has descended from Etruscan lineage and knows a lot about this really interesting culture that sort of evaporated from time. And Ra's going to fill us in on who the Etruscans were, and also a lot of the myths and the magic and the lore that has been passed down in oral tradition, because to this day, there's still not a lot of understanding about the actual language that the Etrurians developed. So let's give people kind of a visual here of the region of Tuscany. So this is essentially what it looked like. And I'm just going to give kind of a bit of a background here from a website to give some context. We're going to bring Ra in to sort of take us deeper. And this is from www.ancient.eu. And this is sort of the historical overview. So it says here, prosperity. So this is all about Tuscany, right? This is all about the Etruscan region. So here we go. The Etruscan civilization flourished in central Italy between the 8th and 3rd century BCE. So we're talking about a pre-Christian civilization. The culture was renowned in antiquity for its rich mineral resources, which we're going to get into with Ra, and as a major Mediterranean trading power. Much of its culture and even history was either obliterated or assimilated into that of its conqueror, Rome. Nevertheless, surviving Etruscan tombs, their contents, and their wall paintings, as well as the Roman adoption of certain Etruscan clothing, religious practices, and architecture, are a convincing testament to the great prosperity and significant contribution to Mediterranean culture achieved by Italy's first great civilization. So it starts off with Villanovan culture, and the Villanovan culture evolves into Etruscan culture. I'm going to read a little bit about this. The Villanovan culture developed during the Iron Age in central Italy around 1100 BCE. The name is actually misleading, as the culture is in fact the Etruscans in their early form. There is no evidence of migration or warfare to suggest the two peoples were different. The Villanovan culture benefited from a greater exploitation of the area's natural resources, which allowed villages to form. So essentially what they did is they found silver, they found bronze, they found iron, and they figured out how to extract it from the earth. And then they were able to create art and I think perhaps even some currency, but it was their art and their craft that was highly valued and treasured, and they were able to basically bank on their art and their craft, and it all came out of the earth. So they exploited the earth, and it really jump-started their civilization and culture. So here's a bit more. Houses were typically circular and made of wattle and dab walls with thatch roofs and wooden and terracotta decoration added. Pottery models survived, which were used to store the ashes of the deceased. As we're going to find out, funerary culture and the afterlife play a huge role in Etruscan culture. What else do we have here? With the guarantee of regular, well-managed crops, a portion of the community was able to devote itself to manufacturing and trade, which was a big deal. The importance of horses is seen in many of the finds of bronze horse bits in the large Villanovan cemeteries located just outside their settlements. By around 750 BCE, the Villanovan culture had become the Etruscan culture proper, and many of the Villanovan sites would continue to develop as major Etruscan cities. The Etruscans were now ready to establish themselves as one of the most successful population groups in the ancient Mediterranean. So real quick here, the Etruscan cities were independent city-states linked to each other by a common religion. language, and culture in general. Geographically spread from the Tiber River to the south parts of the Po Valley in the north, the major Etruscan cities included Cerveteri, Fiusi, Populonia, Tarquina, Vie, Villonia, and Vulci. Cities developed independently so that innovations in such areas as manufacturing, art, and architecture and government occurred at different times at different places. Generally speaking, coastal sites with their greater contact with contemporary cultures evolve quickly because they're port cities. They get to interact with other people from other places, exchange ideas, exchange techniques, exchange goods. But eventually passed on new ideas to the Etruscan hinterland. Nevertheless, Etruscan cities still developed along their own lines, and significant differences are evident from in one city from another. So this is a very, very interesting culture, and they were way ahead of the game when it came to what was going on in the Mediterranean. At one point, they were more powerful than the Romans. The Greeks envied them. They had a trade going on with people in the area that we now know as the Byzantine area or Anatolia or Turkey. They were actually very innovative when it came to sailing because there was a lot of piracy that was going on during that time. And the Etruscans were getting their ships ripped off. And they figured out that they had to have faster ships. So what they did is they innovated, and most ships back then had one sail. The Etruscans added a forward sail on their vessels so that they could outrun the Greeks and the Romans. And that forward sail became a real staple in the evolution of maritime history and nautical development. So these people were on their game. And what I want to do now is just bring Ra on here. And Ra, I want to thank you for coming on the show and adding your historical knowledge and sharing some of the occult and esoteric practices that have been handed down to you. So thanks for taking time out to be here.
It's my pleasure, Robert. Thank you for having me. It's it's really a pleasure. This is a very important topic, because there's not too many of these families left, that actually have retained the DNA, and a lot of people claim to be from Etruscan DNA or claim to, but in reality, a lot of the DNA got so assimilated basically because of the widespread of sex that started to happen. Right. Between the Etruscan civilization, and because of the abundance of everything that took over. It was a war of, let me put it this way, is originally there's no telling where exactly they came from, what realm, what other world they came from, but they're from someone else. Originally they say, Etruscan lore says they come from a mysterious star people called the Inu, which is very similar to like the Anu or something like this. It's very similar to Anunnaki or Inu. So after this, the first spark they touched down in this realm was said to be somewhere in Asia Minor or Persia, Turkey, somewhere around that. And from there, they came to what is known as Etruria. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that this area, these people, they didn't come into this realm for war or for all of this, for sex or anything like this. At first, this abundance took over because their souls started to be challenged with this physical realm. Because in reality, the reason why they stepped into this realm, why they came into matter, why they appeared here, is because they wanted to experience the forces of nature and ultimately to experience death. Mm-hmm. That's why they first came into this world. And that's why they became a cult of the dead all over Europe. We're talking about Greece, Italy, southern Poland, western Ukraine, Czechoslovakia, places like this. This is old Europe. This is where the cult of the dead was. It was not, when I say cult of the dead, it's not to say like, oh, they're concentrating on darkness and evil. I mean, because death was so important to them.
So they celebrated the afterlife, like they were going to carry on in the afterlife with their what I would consider kind of, from what I know, an enlightened hedonistic lifestyle, right? Yeah. I mean, these people were into their bodies. They clearly had a very different consciousness than the other Mediterranean cultures.
and all of the world, and all and the rest of Italy. That what is now Tuscany, that area is different from all of Italy, not because of just their DNA, because of what they believed in. I mean, they believed in women just as equal as men, you
Yeah,
know.
let's touch on that for a second because that's a really important piece here. The women kept their own names, number one, right? So
Most
because
times, yes.
yeah, and because in Greek and Roman culture, and particularly the Greeks, the women didn't even have a name. You know,
Yes.
they were close to being a slave or chattel, and they were held at an equal level. They had their own money, right? They had their
Yeah.
own money, their own wealth. They could read because they had their version of their language. They could read, and there was a very enlightened relationship between the sexes. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there seemed to be some jealousy with the Greeks and the Romans because
For
number one,
sure.
the women were beautiful, and number two, they were very free with their bodies.
They would go to the same gyms as them, things like this, work out next to the men. The
That's
Greeks
right.
didn't like this sort of stuff. You know, when Greeks saw that, they didn't like that sort of stuff. Yeah.
That's right. So they began to spread rumors that they were licentious and slept with their slaves, and there's probably not a lot of truth to that. Am I right about that?
Yes, you're right. The thing that I mean is that they split. The Etruscan, the Etruria civilization split what we know as like the Benindante and the Malandante, because ultimately the whole Etruscan civilization was one religion. Even the Romans referred to them as the old religion. It was the religion of ultimate supernatural forces. They believed in the spiritual and supernatural forces of nature, and it was in everything. Every act, everything that happened was an act of a god or a spirit or something like this, you know. So they believed in this ultimate forces of nature, and they interfaced with nature on a unique level that, you know, is similar to the Egyptians. You know, they're cousins to the Egyptians. I know people don't like to say it. It's the same culture, just sisters or brothers of the same people that came into this realm. Same headdresses, same, you know, and they believed in programming inanimate objects and murals. So when their ancestors would see these objects, these vases, these coins, these murals, it would activate something within their genetic memory, and it would keep the civilization alive. That's even like with the spirit flame. It's said that even as long as one person of the DNA still carries that spirit flame and performs the ritual, it will keep the memory alive. It will keep it activated within the earth, you know?
You know, that's a really interesting point. Apparently, they view the afterlife in very, very different terms.
Yeah,
Like,
their houses were mimics of their coffins. There were mimics of their houses.
that's right. And so
Yeah.
when somebody moved on, they basically returned to the realm of the gods, and they became part of this kind of ancestral pantheon. Am I right about
Yeah.
that?
And comes also from the stellar cults of Persia, you know, that was even before the Etruscans. So that's why I say that, you know, these same beings was first in Persia before they were even in Etruria, because they believed in the royal stars, the watchers, their eyes of the night, that when after these gods or these spirits left this realm, they became pure energy inside the constellations watching over us, as, you know, in their watchtowers.
Well, they were a pretty enlightened group of people. I mean, clearly, from the mythology, which we're going to get into,
Oh, yeah.
fairly complex, interesting, sort of deistic system. But they were also very good at engineering,
Yes.
and they were the ones that actually created the aqueduct and the sewage channels
Sewage. Yeah. Yeah.
in Rome. They're the ones that are responsible. So I mean, and they ran Rome for a while.
Yeah, well, Rome built their superpower off the Etruscans
Right.
completely. You know,
Yeah.
they started a superpower off the Etruscans back. I mean, let's first talk about like where this DNA of the Etruscans come from. You
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
and how it actually and you know, it might be because no one even talks about it. Even the master writer and geneticist, I don't know if he was a geneticist, but he had access to a lot of things in the Vatican. Lawrence Gardner, he tends to always leave out the Etruscans. You know, he doesn't really mention the Etruscans in any of his books too much, but he has amazing information. But there's a reason why people don't bring it up, because it's more of an inherited trait. You know, it's something that's been passed down, and people tend to overlook it. But most of shamanism in Europe and magic in Europe comes from the Etruscan culture. This DNA, this ancient DNA of the Etruscans, you know, is something that can't be proven, of course, but it's been from the guy in Falky in like the, what was it, the 15, 7, I don't know when he was. When was Falky? I think I wrote it down. Falky was he was a I think he was in the I'm not sure when the guy Falky was, but Falky was a geneticist that started hundreds of years ago, started looking into the geneticists of the genes of the Etruscans. And then nowadays, like from the 80s on, this guy Piazza has been doing it. But they've been trying to figure it out for centuries about the genes of the Etruscans. In my family line, it's said, you know, and other people that I've read about and talked about, you know, they kind of hint towards it. But from my understanding, this ancient Etruria, these ancient Tuscans, their DNA is still alive in us because of the old ones, these old ones that came into our realm. And to the Etruscans, they were called the Lassa, Lasa, Lasa. And the first ones that ever come here were Uni and Tagni, or some call them Tania. These were the very old ones, the very ancient ones, very similar to Anu or Uni. You know, it's very similar.
So what are their names again?
The first ones to ever be here, they said, was Uni and Tagni. Some say
Uni and Tagni. Okay, yeah. So are they? What are they? Are they male, female, two males? Are they brothers?
Yeah,
are they related?
Uni was the female, and Tagni or Tania was the male.
Okay.
And similar to like Juno or Jupiter, you know, or Zeus. You know, I guess you can you know, compare it to those. You know, they were like the first ones, these old ones. They call them the Laza. And they came into this realm to experience the elemental forces, the forces of nature, and to experience death. They wanted to experience the cycles and learning about the mystery of death, because they didn't know time. They didn't know death in the realm they were from. They came here to experience the mystery of death and to teach these inner teachings and to start a world here. You know, they wanted to understand death and time and why emotions change when death is on the line. People change when death is on the line. The whole civilization of the Etruscans changed because death came in the mix. And people act differently. Emotions, you experience things differently when there's a limited amount of time. You act differently when there's a limited amount of time. And these old ones never experienced death before. They never experienced time. And that's how they ended up here. And that's how the Etrurians started 1,000 years before Christ, you know, and they foresaw, Robert, they foresaw their demise.
That's right. They said that they were going to have 1,000-year reign, and that was about it. Yeah.
Which is one day in their realm, one day in the realm they're from. They came here to experience, they knew that they foresaw, they were able to pierce the veil of the future, you know, through certain things. That's why us Etruscans, we inherited a certain trait from them, that you're able to see into the future by reading the clouds, reading the way the birds fly in the sky, you know, listening to the wind, listening to nature. By interacting with nature, you can see into the future. You can see into you pierce the veil, you know, in a way, you know, by reading the cycles of things in the stars, in the way the clouds move, the way the birds move and sing.
Right, right. So I brought up an image here, and I'm wondering, are these the two original Etrurians?
Yeah, this is, yes, that is, yep, that's the two original. Those are and you see the ancient Etruscans, they write right to left. So, and that's how the runes would be as well. The ancient Tuscan runes would be right to left. So yeah, that's you would see the male on the left is Tania, and the right would be Uni, but they just wrote Laza there. Laza is a general term for these old ones, you know, and it's actually where the term Lare comes, that the Romans use for house spirits. A lot of the spirits that the Romans talk about are actually old Etruscan gods. And the Lare actually is where Lamia, or even Lilith, comes from. The woman who was equal as man, but eventually society turned, and they were challenged, and they didn't want to bow to man. And that's what originally Lilith, why she diverted, and she ended up punishing humans and the male offspring of people because she didn't want to bow to Adam. You know, if you go outside of the Bible and you start looking into the alphabet of Ben Sira, you start looking into the Zohar, you start looking into all these ancient writings. They even in the Bible, they do mention Lilith. They talk how Lilith did not want to bow down to Adam. He said, "Woman, lie beneath me during sex," you know, and she said she didn't want to. So at this time, she did what the valuable magic of Etruscans is to utter magic in a meteral tonal way. And she uttered the secret names of God, Robert, and she was able to transform her DNA and fly away to the Red Sea. You know, she turned into an owl, a screech owl, and was able to fly to the Red Sea and fly away because she didn't want to bow to man. She didn't want to lie beneath him, you know, and that's the lore of Lilith, and that's the lore of a lot of these ancient goddesses.
Now, but these two, I'm sure that they formed a sacred bond or a sacred union because the civilization comes out of them, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Are there any creation myths or stories about these two?
Yes, and they even have some in ancient Tuscany that derives from it with Diana and Dionysus, where they were almost like brother sister who became one, and they started a civilization, and then they lived apart, and then they join on certain days of the year to have offspring again. So they kind of stayed in the same families in a way, you know. There was a lot of them were, the myths were that brother and sister were god and goddess, you know, and they were actually mating.
Interesting. That's interesting. That's sort of connected to well, it's not really brother and sister, but the connection to Semiramis and Nimrod, Semiramis being Nimrod's mother, right? And also wife. So we're talking ancestral, maybe ancestral.
It's the same thing in Hindu too. They have the same thing going on, you know?
Yeah. Interesting. So what period does this illustration come from?
This probably is from early Tuscan, probably about, I would say right around the 1st century AD, around there.
1st century.
Yeah.
But they weren't around then, right? They ended their reign about.
These are mimics of the
mimics.
Etruscan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So this is like about a century afterwards.
Yeah.
So kind of similar in style, right? Sort of the Etruscan imagery. Look how ornate this is, right? And then you can tell that everything is animated. Like, you know, this is probably what, a leaf and a nature spirit down.
Well, they always include a rue. You know, rue is one of their most important. So they incorporate it in their mirrors, in their medals, in their coins. They put it on the back of them a lot. Or rue and ivy is very important to the Etruscans.
So the mirrors that's a really interesting topic, because what I was able to glean is when the women would pass away, well, first of all, they had very nice bronzed mirrors.
Yeah.
That, you know, really nice bronze mirrors.
And all the women were literate too, and had their engraved and wrote.
That's
on the
right.
back. Yeah.
Personalized and everything, and that was included in as part of their funerary package. So just being able to look at themselves, right, sets themselves apart from other cultures in a lot of ways during the birth. So they have self-awareness, literally self-awareness. This is fascinating stuff.
But really, their true, like I said, their true focus is their spiritual, supernatural power and forces of nature, and charging objects and activating objects and ancestral memory and passing it down. You know, they weren't about like the Romans. They knew the Romans would take them over. They would be assimilated by the Romans, even because they weren't about war. They only did war to defend themselves. They weren't about conquering others through pillaging and raping and all the stuff that the Romans, you know, took over. The Romans took all of their knowledge and used it as their own.
Right. It's because the Romans kind of remind me of the Aztecs in that way. You know, the Aztecs were the same way. They came in and they snatched up the Olmec, you know, knowledge and some of the Olmec rituals, and just, you know, grabbed it. And
they were, I mean, I hate to use the word, but Etruscans were, I like the word to use shamans, but in Italy is one place, Robert, where the word witch is not demonized. You know, a witch means a sort of like an herbalist, a healer. a fortune teller, maybe, there's of course dark ones and bad ones, but I use the word shaman because in America, you use it, you say witch or strega, they think you're talking about evil, but in Etruscan, they were all shaman. They were all into spiritual power. And, this is why things went wrong, because when you see a shaman with an absorbent amount of jewels and gold, something went wrong. Something's not right here. When you see an abundance of everything, something went wrong. And that's where the Etruscan civilization went wrong. They started to be all this extremeness, extreme in power, extreme in nature. They started to use the forces of nature to overcome the will of people, to overcome things, to use it to their benefit. They started to use gold and silver to an abundance, and all of these copper to an abundance, and jewels to abundance. The woman would have so many jewels all over them, and gold. And they knew that our brain was filled with crystals. The ancient Etruscans knew this, that our brain had crystals in it, had magnets in it, and that putting leaves of gold around the head or some kind of gold ornaments on the head will activate the little crystals and magnets in your brain. They knew of this ancient stuff, so these were not primitive people, and so people think, oh, someone that's worshiping nature or gods of the woods or gods of the water or gods of the elements are must be primitive. But they had ancient forces that were beyond what we think of now. We're using this one touch stuff, one touch this, one touch that. They had similar things. They had messenger gods. Teramo was a messenger god. He did things as quick as in the instant from one place to the other. So we're using the technology of the ancients, but we're using it, for the benefit of money and badness, and that's why it went all wrong. Just like the Etruscans, we're doing it to ourselves, in our own way.
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of the nature of things. People get really good at something, and then there's a peak, and there's a decline. It's a cycle. Here's a piece of Etruscan art, which is quite nice here, and you can tell that there's
details.
very elaborate headdress, right? I mean, look at this. I think this is a 3rd century BC right here. And
their ancient DNA, it's funny you say that, they said they have part animal in them. Even ancient ones, the old ones, they had like a part animal, part mixture, part human, part supernatural creature. That's why there was ancient giants and ancient ones. They had help. They didn't, and their magic, it wasn't like you see magic today. They didn't even use like ritual circles or anything like that. They would use like a flat stone dolmen or some sort of flat altar or stone monument and put little things on top of that. They didn't make all elaborate circles and all this weird stuff. They used little objects on top of flat stone surfaces, and they would evoke their spirits that way, and things like that. They didn't have all magic circles. That started later on,
right.
It was very interesting. It was connected to nature in a powerful way.
Yeah, it seems like a very like we said, a very animist culture.
Yeah,
I'm trying to go through some of the pictures you sent me, so that we can illustrate this kind of almost anthropomorphic relationship. Let me see if this is going to work. Let me bring this one out. Well, yeah, this might work. You can sort of elaborate on this image since you're the one that sent it to me. So here we go. Let's pull this up here. It's a little fuzzy, but I think people will get an idea as to what we're looking at. So here we go. Here's a woman, and she's
it's Proserpina. Yeah.
So Proserpina. Now this is a really fascinating image because Murray Hill I just recently posted a nice piece on the goatfish on my website, and there seems to be this really interesting blend of mammals and fish, during this pre-Christian era.
Yeah.
And here we have another version of this kind of fish-like, mammal-like hybrid, and connected to Proserpina. So tell us about her, and maybe elaborate a little bit more on the connection between this animal spirit and Proserpina.
Well, in ancient times, Proserpina is linked to the underworld. Usually when they're on some sort of mystical creature like that, is that they're going to dive into the underworld this way. you know, on this creature. So she's linked to the underworld and linked to bringing back information from the underworld. And she's also connected to the goddess Hecate Triformis, the three-folded goddess, you know. And this is also another aspect of Diana or Ceres or Circe. You know, these are all the same goddess, all the same name. And she's specific to the Tuscan region, Etruscan culture. And, you know, this I think is from around this picture. I don't know if I wrote it down anywhere, but I don't know exactly when in picture this is from, but you know, she is basically where Diana came from, or Persephone, or Persephone, however you want to say it. This is the same goddess, and you know, you'll see that the moon is on her chest as well, and these creatures, you know, it's said that these ancient ones, these ancient creatures that you see are not just mythology, that when people will go into a trance-like state, sometimes even take hallucinogens to go into another plane, they'll be able to ride on these creatures and activate these ancient ones from whatever genetic line they're from. You know, it'll activate within them. So these creatures do exist in another consciousness, on another realm, in another reality. And, you know, Etruscans and Proserpina, these ancient gods, they saw this realm as being a shadow of another reality. They knew that we were living in a shadow of another existence, some holographic state, some simulated experience. You know, they just said it in their own way.
Right. It's, you know, it's really interesting about that period of time. Like if you go back and look at the sort of the founder of the Merovingian line, Merovi.
Yeah.
You know, his birth
Claudius
origins,
or what? No, not I forget his name now. I forget. What was his name?
Well, his actual name was Merovi, right? He's the guy that starts the Merovingian line. And
Can't think of the one name I was thinking of, though. There was one name I was thinking of.
Well, there's Clovis.
Clovis.
Yeah, Clovis is like the Constantine of the Merovingian line.
Yeah.
Right. So Merovi claims that or at least the legend is that he was born of a sea beast. And you get like a few of these legends with various sort of progenitors of culture, you know, from around this time, around this period. And it's a fascinating kind of, you know, link between various cultures. Like what was going on? Was there a culture that emerged from the sea, right? Where, you know, I mean, if you look at some of the depictions of people from Sirius, right? Like from the Dogon, they look like they almost look like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so this is really fascinating because we get this mixture, this animist mixture of the mammal and the fish that shows up. Fascinating stuff. So is there any connection like with what I'm talking about with Merovi that relates over to kind of Etruscan origins?
I think that's, you know, I think they have that DNA within them for sure.
Interesting. Okay, let me throw up another picture here.
Because they all come from ancient giants. These are their ancient giants, and that's the bloodline of the Merovingians, you know?
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I found to be interesting was that this was a culture that was adaptable. Like if they found something that they liked from another culture.
Yeah. Phoenicians.
So they started to connect with the Egyptians.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden lions started to show up in their art.
It's true.
Right? And there weren't any lions there, but they loved the lions so much. And they did the same thing with the Greeks. They loved the Greek vases. So they sort of transposed some of that Greek imagery into their own artwork. So it's a very adaptive culture, which to me is one that's very intelligent. I got an image up here of a temple, and you didn't send this one to me, but I picked it up here. Maybe you could kind of validate this. So this is a model or a rendering of an Etruscan temple.
It's like a necropolis.
Yeah. So you have anything that you want to share about that?
It could be because, you know, it could be inside of it. They could have had a pantheon of gods, probably, where they would invoke a pantheon of gods. But it would also be, these temples weren't just about being for death, or some of them were used for sacrifices in some cultures as well. But some of them were literal stargates, were literal portals, were literal places where they would activate, you know, an ancient I guess you would call it an initiation rite, you know,
Mhm.
or something like that, where you would be able to transform your conscious to another dimension, another stargate, another world.
Interesting. Okay. One of the other things
You know,
I
the
that
Acropolis is just like that in Greece, you know?
right. Well, it looks very similar in some ways.
Yeah.
Let me get another image up here. Okay, this is I mean, to me, this kind of speaks to, in some ways, from what I understand about the relationship with women. This picture that I'm about to pull up here. Give me one sec. Right here. This is, to me, this is. I mean, this is almost like Art Deco in some ways. It's really beautiful. Here we go.
Yeah, see, this actually is my daughter's name is Tana. This
Uh-huh.
is the goddess Tana, and she is the star goddess. And they saw the Milky Way as the river of Tana, and she is in all their ancient beliefs and kind of like Tania, but a form. They believed in star lore, you know, the
Mm.
in star magic. You know, that was their main focus, was the stars and plants and connecting in this way. And you
Mhm.
know, you see the elaborate headdress on her as well.
Absolutely. And the style sort of speaks to how free the Tuscan women were
And
with
how
their
physically
bodies.
fit they were. Yeah.
That was the other thing too, right? They were
Yeah.
physical specimens.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this is Tana, and she's a star goddess. Is that what she is?
Yeah. She's the goddess of the stars. Yep. That's what they saw her as. And
So go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah,
Well, I was just thinking, there's that city in Kazakhstan called Ashtana. You
even
know,
in Hebrew, a sage or a mystic is Tana or Tanakh.
Tana.
You know,
Uh-huh.
that's to be a sage or a mystic. So it's about having ancient wisdom, ancient star magic. And let's talk about this for a second, because I've said this before, and I think you'll find this interesting. Um, the connection to your stars and your star origins and star knowledge was everything to the Etruscans. And this is where the word disaster comes from, Robert. Dis to the Etruscans was the lord of the underworld, right? So dis means moving away from, having less knowledge of, having less than, moving away from, right? And Aster is the lord of the stars, knowledge of the stars. So
Mhm.
disaster is having no knowledge of the stars, less knowledge of the stars, moving away from knowledge of the stars, moving away from your star origins. And that's what a disaster is. So this is how disaster got created. A disaster is being connected from the stars, being disconnected from the stars, being disconnected from your true star origins.
Mhm.
And that's an interesting word, and because it stems from the Etruscan lord of the underworld, Dis.
Mhm. So it's not knowing where you come from,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Got to know where you come from, so you know where you're going,
Yep.
right?
Everything's within your DNA. Everything's embedded within your DNA. You know.
So here's another interesting image. Maybe you can break this one down for us.
Yeah, well, this is the three aspects of the gods and the like. You got the eternal life, the immortal life. You have the higher intelligence, the spirit flame, and you have the one that spins and weaves and cuts the thread of life at the end. The three fates.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they're in Etruscan, um, like unlike a lot of different belief systems, and you see the one in the middle is almost holding like an Ankh-like device.
Mhm.
It's like almost like an Ankh,
Mhm. Mhm.
is an Ankh basically. You see the Etruscans, unlike the others, they believed both the female and the male had fates. There's these three fates that watch over and weave the lives of human, spin the lives of human. And when they spin the lives of human, they spin it in a certain spiral design. And when they choose that the spiral design is totally done, that's when they cut the thread of life at the end. And that is
Interesting.
the three aspects. The in the goddess, you have the maiden, the mother, the crone, you know. And
Right.
here is another aspect of them where, you know, the younger, the middle age, and the old one is the one that cuts the thread of life at the end. You see the older one.
Right.
And
The crone does the cutting.
yep.
The snipping of the cord, right?
Yep. Yep.
Very
And I think
interesting.
in where was it I think I even yeah, so in ancient Etruria, ancient Etruscan, even in Tuscany afterwards, these three fates, Maratega, Rododesta, and Befana, these were the three fates, and they spin the lines of all humans. Like I said, they're weaving patterns of each and every individual on this planet, and each and every one of us have a certain existence, and they weave the pattern of your life, and they cut the thread of life when the spiral design is complete.
When the pattern is finished.
Yep. And you see, that's why us Etruscans, our lineage, us Strega, the reason why we use certain things like say pouring a few drops of olive oil into water and using that to sort of look into it and gaze into it, or to look into crystals. We're doing this to catch a glimpse of this pattern that they're weaving, to catch a glimpse of this pattern that they're weaving from us, to look into the future, to look into our timeline.
Right. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So in terms of your own timeline, when did you become aware of your connection to your culture, and how was that passed down to you?
Well, I have my not ancient, but my great grandmother was the first one. She was still alive up until I was, I think, 11 years old. And I had a near-death experience when I was 9. I was in 1977, and it's interesting because my grandmother used to tell me little stories. My Aunt Betty would tell me little stories when I was at my mom's house of our certain magic and about the evil eye and different stuff. But I never paid any attention to anything like that. And my family, like most Strega, appear as Catholics. A lot of them appear because they worship the saints like gods. Some of them, they look at saints like gods. And even though I don't worship gods like that, I look at it in a different way. I don't pray to the gods like that. I kind of take my own route, but I do pay respects to the old ways. I do, but I don't believe in certain things that they believed in certain ways. But I have my own, but I do pay respects to it, and I do appreciate it. It was their way of understanding and relating to the abilities that they had. They had to relate to it by praying to these gods. I relate to my abilities in a different way.
So at 9, you had a near-death experience. How does this relate to your awakening to your Etruscan origins?
Okay, so when I at that time, I used to be scared of my great grandmother whenever I saw her, and she would always approach me, give me a little kiss. Her Nana, she didn't speak any English. Her name was actually Santa Bianco. She married my grandfather, and her last name changed to Morrow, which means actually Moor. Their name was D Morrow, but they changed it when they came to New York to just Morrow, which means of the Moors. So their last name was Dark. Moors means dark, and her last name was White. So literally Santa Bianco means Saint White. She married, Vincenzo Dark. It's very interesting, right? So she's from this old lineage. And even that's from my mom's side. Even on my dad's side, they have it in their family as well. So it's on both sides. But my mom's side has the Etruscan side. So my great grandmother, noticed something in me after my near-death experience. And when she saw me, she even said to me, "Of the Fata, I'm of the fate. I have the blood." She knew I had the blood in me, and I didn't understand what she meant at the time.
Right.
But it's been 30 years since my near-death experience, and I've pieced together all these crazy and mystical experiences I've had all these years and different things that has happened to me, and I've understood it. And at that time, I think at 9 years old, during my near-death experience, that was my shamanistic initiation into the old way.
Yeah. So do you have any recollection of your near-death experience?
Yeah, I've talked about it before. If you want me to explain, if you want me to tell it to you, I will. It's pretty
bust it out,
intense.
Man. Yeah, bust it out.
Okay, so I'll make it pretty quick. The reason why I ended up almost dying was they had to operate on me to save my life. I was even though I was 9-10 years old, I was pretty high level soccer player. I was always high level in sports, and I was on a traveling soccer team in New York State under my birth year, 1978. So all the kids that were the best ones in New York from 1978 were on this team, and we played other places, right? So we were a travel team for New York, and I was on this team. It was pretty high level. It was November, really cold in New York at the time. The ball was wet, for like freezing rain almost, and I was the sweeper, which is the last guy before the goalie, and the guy was going to shoot on the net, and he was winding up to take the shot, and I stepped right in front of him, and not only did the ball hit me in my private parts, but then his foot hit me in my private parts.
Right.
So I was down on the floor holding my family jewels, hurt for a while.
Right.
I had to go out of the game, had to go home. I wouldn't let my parents bring me to the doctors because I didn't want the doctors to look at my privates. I was arguing with them. So I made my parents bring me home. I ended up falling asleep. Next morning, I got up. I told my mom I had a stomach ache. I didn't want to go to school. She made me go to school. I somehow I got on a bus. I don't remember anything. They said I was walking towards class and I blacked out and passed out. What had happened is my testicle had spun around each other and a black tissue had formed, and it was cutting off the blood flow and oxygen going to my body, like going. And I was dead. Like they had to like cut me open. Yeah, pull the blood tissue out and black tissue out and take it out.
Wow.
Yeah. So while the next thing I remember is being in the hospital room. My sister brought my Nintendo in there. They bought me all these presents. People were like, "Oh my God, you're okay." This whole thing going on. And while I'm eating cereal the next morning in the hospital room still, I'm starting to get these blinking recollections of me being like suspended in.
Yeah, we lost you there. It's an interesting moment. Okay. We seem to have reached...
I was in water, but I don't remember being wet at all.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. There was a really weird moment where you pixelated out. You were almost like in a crucifix form. It was very unusual.
Wow. So, okay. So I remember being in like some sort of cylinder or sphere.
Yeah.
And I'm in like a crucifix position, and it's sort of like it's sort of like being in a carpenter's level where I was trying to center out and like I was the bubble inside the water and I was trying to center myself out.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In this and like I was inside of almost like a carpenter's level, but I had my arms and legs out and I was trying to center myself out like I was the bubble to stay center. Right. And like it felt like I was in water but I don't remember being wet. And I heard stuff coming over me like it was information or something like that. And on the north, the south, the east, and west, on every end, at the end of my arms, at the top of my head, at the bottom of my feet, there was these floating. I guess they were hooded. They just were black figures with the light coming out of them. And I could remember things being talked about and things coming over me and all this stuff just coming to me. And I kept getting visions of this. And like I had to like awaken myself make myself level in the bubble to wake up. And then like I woke up and then I guess I was in the hospital room. And and I kind of pieced together these blinking recollections of it. But I remember these beings being all around me. And I think this is what they call the Grigori. The Grigori are the watchers. They watch over anybody of the blood, that has a certain lineage, that has certain abilities, that has magic in their family, has stargate information within them. And my family has been involved in, like watching over portals and knowing about ancient stargates and ancient, monuments, ancient stones that are encoded with ancient information. So maybe somewhere in my DNA, they're watching over this. They're keeping me alive and initiating me or something. Of course, as a young boy, I had no clue. This is after 30 years of thinking about this moment, me saying this. But as a child, it was pretty weird thinking about that, and seeing that. And at that time, I think that was like a shamanistic initiation. They were like escorting my soul or something. And it's interesting because later on in life, I started to read about mystical initiations. And the whole idea, Robert, of being on a crucifix is an ancient initiation mystical rite that was used in the pyramid of Cheops in Egypt. They would use what they call the deep sleep of Siloam, where someone would, and it's related, I guess, to the pool of Siloam from Jesus, who actually like cured a man of being blind in that pool. It's an ancient pool in Mesopotamia, but they call the deep sleep of Siloam, where they would take the mystical initiation guy or whoever's being initiated, they would suspend them on a crucifix, not nailed. They would tie them to a crucifix for 3 days and 3 nights in some subterranean pyramid or chamber or cave until their soul plunges into that deep sleep and is about to die. Their ego is smashed. They're hung up on this crucifix into their spiritual, and their ego is just no more. And spiritually, they open up that swirling vortex within their chest and they plunge into the deep sleep. They plunge into to Hades or Amenti or Patala, whatever. If you're Hindu, it would be Patala. If you're Egyptian, Amenti. If you're a Christian, Hades or hell. But you plunge into the other world to get information, to confabulate with the gods and come back renewed. This is what Jesus did on the cross. You know, I mean, he plunged into Hades. He saw Abraham there. He saw all these guys there from the Bible, from the Old Testament. You know, so what are they doing in hell? What are they doing down there? You know, that's a whole nother story. But
yeah, it's like, hey, you guys got it wrong, man.
Right?
Sorry, I'm out of here.
He sees Moses down there, Abraham. Yeah. But yeah, so like that's part of this mystical. And the pyramid of Cheops was used in this in ancient Egypt, you know, and even King Og of Bashan was said to do this when he lost the moon child. He was trying to make a magical moon child with another. I think her name was Lesta, Queen Lesta. She was a Rephaim, an ancient giant. And King Og, because of Nimrod, lost the moon child. They were creating a magical moon child, trying to preserve this Rephaim DNA. And so when the moon child was about to die, King Og went into the temple of Baal and hung himself on chains for 7 days until his soul plunged into that deep sleep. And he went and talked to Baal and pleaded for the life of the moon child. You know, it's talked about this in the Lost Book of King Og, you know, and the Book of the Giants. So this is an ancient mystical rite. And maybe when I was on the operating table, they had my one arm in IVs and the other one in other things. And my legs were out because they were operating. I was like being worked on. So I was in that position and I was near death and I plunged into that deep sleep.
Right. You know, Odin has a very similar story, right? Being hung on the Yggdrasil tree, right?
Yeah, Yggdrasil. Yeah.
Very similar. So you come out of the other thing that strikes me about your story is kind of like how you got there, and you were hitting your testicles.
Yeah.
Right. And
very
so,
important.
and then they had to release blood. I mean, that's like an ancient tale, right? It's fascinating. It's
on my left test. It was my left testicle too.
Yeah, very mythopoetic, man. Well, obviously things are going okay because you're
I was able to have a baby.
You're a dad now, so congratulations.
Thank you, and she's the goddess of the stars too.
Yeah. So now all of a sudden, your grandmother looks at you in a very different way.
Yeah.
And does she take you into her confidence? What kind of exchanges do you have? Where does it go from there?
No, see, she had passed away right after that.
Oh, okay. But she witnessed that, though.
She witnessed that. Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, it's in both sides of my family. Even my mom, she was very powerful, and she might have not followed the old ways, you know, but it was passed down to a lot of us. You know, I'm the one out of my brothers and sisters that I think was brought to carry on, you know, this DNA. You know, not necessarily pray to gods and do all this stuff, but to carry on this knowledge, these inner mysteries that we learned about nature, about, you know, meditation and about working with crystals and plants. You know, this is what we're originally here for.
So where do you pick up on your cultural thread? About what age and how does that all start for you?
Well, all throughout my life, I always was into reading about it, researching about it, shamanism, mystical things. Always. I was even in high school, I was like most individualistic. I was a musician. I was traveling. But when this happened, Robert, it activated certain things in me that I had forgotten about for a while. When I was a small kid, like 3 or 4 years old, I was having experiences. And then it sort of disappeared for a little while. I don't remember anything else happening. But after this happened, it sort of brought another planes of existence to me. I started becoming aware of other things around us that other people weren't seeing it and talking about. If they knew about it, they sure weren't telling me. And it made me really scared. You know, even my mom told me to hush up about certain things. I remember driving to school and telling her there's people in the road that weren't there. She'd stop in the car, Mom, and she's like, what the hell's the matter with you? Hitting me in the head. So, you know, because I'm thinking people were in the road. So when I became a teenager, I started partying. My band started doing drugs. I started doing drugs. I started rebelling a lot, you know, and it kind of disappeared for a while. And then, you know, I got in some trouble as a teenager. But when I graduated, I became a man, 18, 19. I didn't have to depend on anybody anymore. I kind of went and traveled on my own. And, you know, and that's when I really started to pick up mystical tradition. I cleaned up my life. I did ayahuasca. I took a Muay Thai camp. You know, I did a lot of things that really started to awaken it. So I would think around 1997, 98, I really started to focus and become who I am now. You know, I graduated high school in 96. I would say by 1999, I was completely done with partying. And by 2000, I was like ready to become a man and started really understanding things a lot better, you know, and started to be more into my tradition, and things started to activate in me. I started remembering things. Things started coming to me in my dreams. You know, that's Etruscans are dream seers. You know, most of the ancient shaman, I believe that I come from an ancient shamanistic line, that we are ancient dream seers. You know, I get visions in my dreams on a weekly basis. And if I'm not just passing out, if I go to sleep and I'm not just exhausted and drained, and I really go to sleep and I ask for certain information, I'll get it in my dreams. You know, I get answers in my dreams. I get information that way. You know, I could find out things about people really quick if I want to. You know, it's something that's come, you know, from this experience, I think. And I think that I was, if you want to say, time coded in a way to go through that near-death experience. I think it was on my timeline. You know, it was part of I have free will. We have our own life choices, but I think it was part of, I was sort of like time coded to spiritually awaken at certain moments. And I think we all are at the time of our birth. We choose this path that we're in, and we're sort of time coded.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a similar experience on my own, albeit much earlier than you. I was at 18 months and I had spinal meningitis, and I was brought into the hospital, and
Wow.
I was baptized and given my last rites simultaneously because the priest didn't think I would make it through the night.
Wow.
And so the next day I popped out. There were a lot of people that were praying for me, but I was, you know, at about 18 months, I was at death's doorstep. I don't have a lot of recollection of that, but I'm convinced that something happened.
Yeah, I am too.
During that time. So I wanted to bring up another image here. You talked about this one before.
Afterwards, I'm going to message you. We'll talk privately.
Okay, so here we go. We have Alasa right here.
Yes.
And she's, and again, this is really fascinating because you see the animism, you know, sort of the eyes in the vine. I mean, everything is alive here.
Yep.
And
everything in nature, every object is linked to the gods and to the spirits and has a force of its own.
So what about Lhasa? She's like a pretty significant figure, right?
Yeah, Lhasa, like I said, that's what we started off the show when I was talking. These were the first ones. These were the old ones, the first ones to come into our realm.
And they have wings. The wings are specific, right? I mean,
they are what you would, I guess, what Christians, or if you were Hebrew, you would call them archangels. I guess if you were Christians, you would call them angels. Whatever you would want to call it, they're interdimensional creatures that can fly between realms in that way. That's why even the blue flame is a sort of technology that opens up dimensions, and things can walk between realms, between the blue flame. And that's why a lot of fairies and beings are pictured with wings, because they move so quickly between realms, in and out of existence. They can become invisible. It looks like they're flying. It looks like they have wings because they can move in and out of existence so fast.
You know, yeah. And there's this feeling with wings of descent, right? Like they came from someplace.
Yes.
and landed, right? I mean, I think it's fascinating imagery.
And and it's all about the degree or angle you're at. That's why they call angels angles, because at certain degrees or longitudes, at certain places, other certain dimensions and portals open up. The Etruscans believe the North Quarter is the most ultimate power. Even at Lake Nemi, everything's at the north side of the lake, the most powerful side of the lake. This is where you open up the forces, is the north. The north, and at 33 degrees north is Mount Hermon. This is where the fallen angels first touched down. It's the North Quarter. It's the 33 degree of north. The North Quarter is is where the power lies. The south is the fire.
Interesting. So she's got a bottle in her right hand, which contains spirits, right?
Yes.
And the Etruscans were master winemakers. They were noted for their wine, and they actually traded quite a bit with their urns of wine. Apparently, the Visigoths and the Germans really got into the Etruscan wine. So you were talking about Strega too, right? The liqueur. Let me see if I can find that, since we're on that topic. And
I mean, there's so much. We could do like so many shows on this. I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's so many different spirits too of the and different things that get activated that are called in Etruscan or even Italian folklore. They have like a general term for spirits called the folletto or folletti. And these can be everything from elves to goblins, Robert, to gnomes, to whatever. They're called the folletto or folletti. Wait, I dropped my mouse. And
go ahead.
So there's all different types of these things. The one of them is that you might have heard of is connected to the elven race, and even the Lhasa, they're part of the elven gene. They're an elven gene. They're that ancient DNA from another world, from another time place, and the Linchetto are like these sort of night spirits or night elves. And they cause nightmares. They cause mischief at night. They cause weird noises at night. But the way the Etruscans would deal with them, because they're specific to the Tuscany region, they're supposed to be specific to the stones, the mountains of the Tuscan region specifically. How the Etruscans dealt with them at night was if you would throw seeds on the floor or put like a curly hair on the floor, they would spend all night trying to pick up the seeds or all night trying to straighten the curly hair. They hate disorder. So they hate some sort of disorder. So they would leave in despair, trying to pick up the sticks all night or matches or whatever you threw or straighten up the curly hair. So that's the way to deal with these, because they hate all of disorder.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's so.
There's so many tales like that.
Here's that image of Strega that you sent me, and very, very Etrurian, right, in terms of its depiction and illustration.
Yeah, and see, this is actually in a company in Benevento, Italy. I have it right here. This is what I use for the spirit flame ritual, and you can see that they have the hair. Her hair is actually snakes.
That's right.
And she has the screech owl here, and they are dancing around the walnut tree. And the Etruscans, this comes from the Etruscans. That spiral ring dance is that's the sacred dance of all tribes. They dance around the flame, they dance around the sacred tree, they dance around the sacred stone. This is how to activate stargates. This is how to activate portals. And you could do it through a shaman's drum. You could do it through the sacred dance. You could do it through many ways. But this is a perfect example of, being naked and doing the sacred dance and dancing around the sacred tree. And, even a fig tree is very sacred to that area as well. And this is the walnut tree, but another tree is very sacred is the oak tree as well. The oak tree is very sacred to the Italy and to the Strega.
There's a lot of witchy poo.
Yeah,
in the symmetry. So
yeah, it's witchy, like really witchy. It's made that way just for fun, but there's a lot of ancient symbols in it though as well. The broom is a connection to the underworld as well. you know, having that connection to the underworld, the broom's fate, when the, you know, and you see how the broomstick is you could ride between realms and fly by night. Even the owl, the Romans saw witches as being able to transform into owls. Even the word strega, first strego means to enchant, but also strega comes from strix, which is screech owl in Latin. You know, the term strix, and this is where the strega comes from. I mean, there's many different words for a shaman in Italian as well. You can even be called like a mago or maga for a woman. You know, and to have like a group or a sacred grove or a sacred would be a boscetto, like a you know, your coven or something like that, a group of people.
So I'm sure you're aware of what these women did with the broomsticks, right? Like you know how they. So what the witches did is that they would line their broomsticks with combination of like tallow and psychedelic herbs.
Oh yeah.
And then they would literally put it between their legs, right, without any undergarments on.
Yeah.
And they would rub the broomstick with this psychedelic potion between their legs, and they would like flip out, get totally high, and go on a trip, and it would be like they'd be riding their magic brooms, like, you know, and in their mind, I'm sure that they were way out there in space. So
it would stir their cauldron with it first.
Well, the very funny story about this, right? Because the tradition of the witches with this psychedelic, you know, concoction between their legs, it sort of began to spread into like households, and men would come home sometimes and see their wives with these brooms between their legs, you know, running around the house and doing, you know, all kinds of crazy shit, right? So check this out. So when some of these women came to the New World in the United States, they wanted to keep the magic broom rides going. And so they found out that the Native Americans had their kind of own sort of, you know, psychedelic, you know, mixture, you know, whether it was mushrooms or they had their thing, right? Yeah. So these women asked the local tribes, well, you know, can you do this and do this and do this and put it together, right? And so they did, but their journeys were very different.
I can imagine, yeah.
And so there was like, it was a bit too much for them. It wasn't as, you know, kind of wild and randy. So the broom riding sort of came to a stop when they got to the New World. But it's an interesting little tidbit that is just like the you know, with the Pakistanis or the Iraqis or the Afghanis and the rugs, right? The magic carpet rides.
Yeah.
You get high in hashish.
Yep.
And you go into the geometry of that carpet, and that carpet becomes a portal and
becomes a whole world.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, so you were alluding to this language of the stars and the connection to the stars.
Well, this you know, this is the let's go a little bit to how much time do we have?
We got some time. I wanted to bring up some of these symbols that you brought, but go ahead. You roll with it.
Well, let's first let's get into that too, the symbols, but too, like the Romans, you know, the first, like you were mentioning earlier, like a lot of the first Romans were Etruscans.
That's right.
You know, and they took a lot of the Etruscan civilization, and even they saved that last temple, their most holy place, for themselves, and they started still using it at the end. I think you even put a picture of it at first. It's where like Lemnos is, that island. It's I think I forget the name of they had 12 cities, the Etruscans, but the thing that people don't talk about is they also had 12 secret cities beneath the ground, mirrored. So people don't talk about the temples beneath that as well. Yeah. What is there? Vitellonia? That's actually the 12th and last, the Vitellonia, that's the last of the 12 Etruscan civilizations that were, and it was, I think, found, and, you know, not too long ago, maybe 100 years or so ago, they started really, you know, going through it and really understanding the DNA from that area. But that was the last of the Etruscan civilizations, and there was a holy center there as well in Volterra and Merlot is very important places. And whereas the highest concentrated of the DNA today is ancient Volterra, even in Volterra, they still have an old Etruscan gate, Etruscan arc, that's there, the entrance to the city. It's very amazing there. They have a lot of polygonal stuff and things like that. But there was a Roman emperor, Claudius I. Now he composed and wrote like a group of books, like 20 books that he copied of the Etruscan history. His wife was of the Etruscan lineage. She was Etruscan. And Claudius I, I think his wife was Plaudia or something like that. Plaudia. She was Etruscan blood, and she was from the old family, and she taught him. She was actually had a really strong Etruscan knowledge, and she taught him a lot. And she was able to put him in touch of a lot of the authentic Etruscan ways, and she taught him about a lot of the ancient books. And he was able to compose all of these books of these ancient Etruscan rites. And Claudius, he sort of started to pay respects to the old traditions and follow these old ways, and started to become in tune with these old ways. And during his reign, he basically established laws that protected the diviners, these ones that kept these laws and rules of the Etruscan, the knowledge of the Etruscan. And he convinced the Roman Senate to establish a library to house all the writings of these Etruscans and to have some of them. And this library, that's the most special thing that they had, was these mystical Etruscan writings that they call the Sibylline books. And these are I think there's 3 of them actually. They're these legendary books from Etruscan kings, and they were sold to Etruscan kings, and they were held on to, and they're from the ancient mystic Sibylline or Sibyl. She was of Cumae. She was like a time goddess, like a stargate goddess.
Right.
And she was like she had ancient knowledge, and these books were very important. And the Sibylline books were consulted by the Senate of Rome, and the Emperor Augustus had copies made of them, and I think it was in like 18 or 1920 BC, something around there. And he had protected against their loss and took hold of these. And so who knows, they're probably in the Vatican today.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised the Vatican is sitting on a lot of Etruscan, magic and esoterica, because that's what they do, right?
I mean, some people say they were burned, but who knows? They said they could have had them burned because they offended Christianity, but they did disappear. So there's a lot of stuff, that we were scared to write down. That's why things became oral. You had to pass it down that way. That's why, when you hear of the old world, of the old ways, there's a lot of abilities that we have. One of them is being able to tap into a database of many stories and ancient tales and ancient things that you get ingrained in you all your life. You have to, they call it the Velia. That's when, if you're of the blood, if you have the lineage, you can attend these. It's spelled Veglia. You can attend these like after work hours parties where you sit by the fire and you talk about the old ways, you talk about the old religion, you talk about the old myths, how we got here, all these old stories, and you have these discussions. That's part of the reason why we have no culture here in the United States.
Right.
No true culture. No, we're all from somewhere else. We all forgot where we're from. We don't have these meetings anymore. These family members would get together and talk about their grandparents and talk about the old stories and relate it to now. It's horrible.
The people that are invested in their bloodlines do, and I can guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting image. Maybe you can shed some light on Bellaria.
Yeah, so Bellaria is the spirit of the air. So this is an elemental spirit, and this, when you would pray to the spirit or use certain elements to activate the spirit, they give you knowledge of the voice of the wind. And this is how you're able to understand and read the clouds and be able to understand the flight of birds. And like I was mentioning earlier, this is very important, Robert. I know it sounds primitive, but
No, not at all. Not at all.
it's to some people it might sound primitive, but it's very important to the Etruscan culture, is that they understood how to look into the sky and see the plurality of worlds and see the oneness in everything, and understand that the flight of birds, the sound the birds are making, the way the clouds are moving, everything is telling you, is talking about the timeline, is talking about our world. It's giving you a clue into the future, because it's all happening now, and you're able to see it. And that's what she's about, this Ballaria.
Interesting. Again,
Yeah, they related. They. I guess, that's why I don't believe in these ways like this. But the old ways was to, the abilities that we had. They had to relate it to something tangible, some sort of god to pray to, some sort of monument to make it. They like to imprint it in some sort of object. And
right.
Aria was supposed to be the ancient spirit of the air that gave you the ancient mysteries of the wind.
Interesting. So I wanted to pop these symbols up because they're fascinating, and you sent me like 3 pages of them, and let's just go through. They almost remind me of sigils in some ways.
Yeah, they are basically.
So here's one page, and which really grabs my attention is the T, which is the Tau cross, which is really what you were referring to with the crucifix story. The sacrifice for enlightenment with the T and the Tau cross. Why don't you go ahead and break some of these down for us?
You see, even it's awesome that they have see how the Earth is sort of like a Nubian pyramid almost. That's how you project sigils into the manifestation of the triangle. Everything manifests inside the triangle, and Earth is seen as a manifest machine. So, when inside the triangle, you can project whatever sigil or whatever intention you want. And Earth is seen as you can manifest whatever you want on this physical plane if you believe in it enough. And that's why this pyramid is like that. And there's certain things that you could see the union between the male and the female. There's very interesting. See this down here where it says magical portal all the way at the bottom. That is like the moon altar. That is to sort of like bring down and draw down the power of the moon on top of the altar there. And it holds the power of the moon and how you download the information from the ancient ones. And most of them, a lot of them are self-explanatory. The serpent masculine is seen as the serpent riding up the sort of like the kundalini, riding up the spinal cord till it gets to the back of the brain stem, starting from the base of the spine, rides up the spinal cord.
It also looks like seed, right? Looks like sperm too.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah. Fascinating. Beginnings, gains. It reminds me of the sign of Libra.
It does. You're right.
Yeah, and the sun image. This is like almost straight out of Zuni culture from New Mexico. Very similar image. Fascinating stuff here. It's almost like there's this kind of cross-cultural assemblage. Strife is very reminiscent of Tewaz, the rune, the warrior rune, right here. Very interesting. And of course, the broom feminine looks like a cocktail glass. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, this is used as like in ancient Tuscany still today. A lot of these symbols are used in magic.
Very interesting. So there's a couple more here that I wanted to pop in.
The ones with the stars.
Yeah, I got that one.
Different star patterns, yeah.
Let's see if I can just locate that.
I don't know if I have. I don't even know if I have those ones that are here.
Yeah, here we go. Check this out. All right, here we go. So here's your star patterns.
Oh yeah. See, these are amazing, and they're very similar to like sigils as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you see, a lot of these are, they have the four royal stars.
Hmm.
I don't know if they're all on here, but some of them are, like Aldebaran.
Hmm.
These are very important stars to the ancients.
Yeah, Regulus is not on there. I don't see Regulus.
Yeah, but Regulus is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have it on there, but
You know what's really interesting about this, Rod? This almost looks like circuitry. You
yeah,
know,
that's what my
printed.
buddy Masaki was saying one time too. It really does. And Aldebaran, it's one of the four guardian stars, one of the main stars. The eye, it's seen as the eye of God. It's seen as the eye of Taurus, the eye of God.
That's where
And
the bullseye is.
yeah, the red eye of God, the
Yeah.
bullseye. Yeah. And this is seen as the watcher of the night,
Uh-huh.
and this was actually
It's where Sirius is, right? Aldebaran.
Aldebaran is in Taurus. Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in it's the eye of the bull.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's um it comes from Taurus, but it was the first of the star signs. It was seen as before Aries replaced it, right?
Yeah, well, it's the age of Taurus, Baal, the bull.
Yeah, then Aries had replaced it, right? So it's on the it lies slightly on the, what's it called, the ecliptic,
Yep.
and it's on the path of the moon's orbit. So it marks one of the main mansions in the 28 mansions of the moon, like the ones I showed you. It's mystics and occultists look at this like it's literally it could be like a dark omen to some, and people would like wear rubies, bearing rubies, sort of like connecting to this to protect themselves from Aldebaran and things like this. And this was I think it is the second moon mansion, and it has negative and positive aspects to it, but it links to ruby, of course, because it's color, but it's one of the most important signs from ancient Etruscan, one of the most important ones, and it was really important to Hitler as well, and the Nazis. And they were talking to and communicating with beings supposedly from Aldebaran.
Speaking of Nazis, I was really struck by the symbol of the swastika that shows up in Etruscan art as well.
Well, you see, that's what I forgot to mention before when I was talking about the deep sleep of Siloam and being on the crucifix. That swirling vortex that opens up, that's when the swirling vortex turns into the swastika. It turns into that swirling portal. It turns into that, and that's part of this. It's part of connecting to the underworld.
Very prevalent in their art. You can see a number of examples of it.
It's also like the eight arms of Agni in Hindu. The swirling vortex. It's very similar to Tagni in Etruscan and Agni in Hindu. They're all similar names, and I think part of the swastika is about that swirling vortex, opening up that vortex.
Right, and it's a cross-cultural symbol.
Yeah,
obviously, because the Tibetans
used it for wisdom. Yeah,
had adopted it as well. Very interesting. So they have released
this one. I don't mean to cut you off. This one too is the Caput Algol. That's a very interesting one, and also was seen as like the head of Medusa.
Okay.
And that's a very interesting star, and it's in the constellation of Perseus. And that was seen as one of the most wicked of stars, and people would put that symbol on to protect themselves against that energy.
Interesting. And of course, we have Capricorni over there.
Yeah.
Very with the key and both of the canuses, major and minor.
Yeah.
This is really cool. So, how were these symbols used? Were they drawn, scribed?
Yeah, they were put on stone altars.
Yeah.
Moon altars. In all sorts of ways.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Have you ever thought about like doing tours, taking people over to Etruria and
That would be amazing.
you should think about it, man. I think they're, you know, just,
Ancient Volterra would be good because that's where I'm connected to. That
yeah.
city, Volterra. Yeah.
I'd go over there, just do a fact-finding mission and see what you could
That and
piece
Lake
together,
Nemi.
you know, because
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think a lot of people would be interested in something like that. And, you know, Egyptian tours are great, Peruvian tours are great, but for a lot of folks, this would be uncharted territory and
True.
could be real rich.
Yeah, geneticists and people have been really hiding the knowledge of these people, the ancient Etruscans, because they were about spiritual power and they got corrupted by Roman influence.
Yeah. Yeah. The Romans really kind of snatched everything out from under them.
Yep.
And you know, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Etruscans were living a good life. I mean, they were really, you know,
Yeah.
They had it all in a lot of ways, and you know, but they knew that their time would come. They knew that their reign would be over, and now we have their culture and the emissaries of their culture in the form of you to share.
Yep. It's
So
true.
yeah. So what else would you like to share with us today?
How much time we got?
Well, we got a few minutes. We can roll a little bit.
Wherever you want to go.
Did you want to do that ritual? Is that what you wanted to do? Like
If you wanted to do it before we
why don't we do that? Why don't you bust out
we shut out all the lights.
Before you do that, let me just check in with the chat room.
Okay. I haven't even looked at. I'm not in YouTube or anything, so I don't know what's going on.
Let me just see if there's anybody.
Let me see if I wrote down anything I wanted to bring up that I didn't. I mean, there was so much.
You do that, and I'll check in with the chat, see what's going on with people. Let's see. Let me see if I can get up to speed here.
Well, there's so much. I mean, but there's always other times. And
yeah. Let's see. Aldebaran has a planet thought to be 7 times the size of Jupiter. I have to go now if you see me. Hey, so do you guys have any questions for Ra? Anything you want to ask him while he's setting up for his ritual?
There's a lot of authors you can check out too that I could point you guys for Etruscan stuff. Muller and Hamilton, Leyland. There's a few of them out there. James Fraser. Let me shut out the lights in here.
Let's see. What else we have here? Anything? Sorry, I'm blocking the chat box here. Okay. Anything else? Any questions? Seems to be a prevalent theme. People take away the roots. Excellent info. You guys have any questions for Ra? Hey, Jill. Oh, thanks on there. How can we make a pyramid? Jill wants to know how we can make a pyramid. I think there are kits online that you can buy.
Like orgone pyramids? Or what kind of?
Okay, here's a legit question.
Okay.
Ron and I actually talked about this a little bit. What does he think of Sardinians in relation to the Etruscans?
Well, it's interesting you say that because the Etruscan influence went over most of Italy, especially all the way to Lazio, and it definitely went over to Sardinia and Malta. Mm-hmm. They definitely have influence on Sardinia and Malta, and some of these ancient giants might even have some of that lineage in them. The Etruscans might be part of them. Might have some of that DNA in them. So there, at one time, giants thrived on Sardinia. And they have a whole network of temples underground that are amazing. That's one place I need to go. I've had good friends of mine that I talked to have been there. I've researched it a lot. I've had family members that have been there, and Sardinia is just somewhere I need to go because I feel strongly connected to that. And Lemnos, Malta, those areas are very ancient, and I do feel Etruscans they were on Sardinia at one time. Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Before we get into the ritual here, tell people about your weekly show, your website, and all the stuff that you do.
Yeah. So I have a show on Truth Frequency Radio called The Eye of Ra, and you could check that out every Saturday night from 7 to 9 Eastern. And I have a Patreon that, you know, if you want to learn how to become your own shaman, if you want inside access to certain ways how to just basically silence your mind again. You know, nowadays we can't even silence our minds. Everybody needs clutter in the background, this on, that on. People are afraid of their own thoughts. I could show you how to have your own thoughts back again. You know, get a little bit of calmness just by certain meditation, certain ways, you know. And I always have great information on there. I do readings for people. Patreon.com/The Mystical Spiral is my Patreon. TheMysticalSpiral.com is my website. And my shows on Saturday nights, TFRlive.com/Eye of Ra. And tomorrow night I'll have Gary Wayne on.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you for that.
So let me just close the shades so we get all darkness.
That's right. Let's get into the temple here.
Yeah. So this is called the spirit flame, and the blue flame is seen as a divine element. You know, you can download ancestral knowledge within the spirit flame, and as long as one person in the world still does this ritual, you can still keep this genetic memory alive, and this intelligence alive, and these inner mysteries alive. And that's why we perform this spirit flame. And what we use is this is called the Liqueur Strega. Before I turn out the lights, I'll show you guys. This is called the Strega Liqueur. You can get this in Vento, Italy. We were talking about the bottle earlier. But if you don't have access to this, you don't want to order this bottle, you can use rubbing alcohol or a high quality cologne, and you put it underneath the full moon. In a green bottle, it works best. It amplifies the energy. And you bless it underneath the full moon for a few hours after nightfall. And that's what you use to pour into your bowl. And this has to be a bowl that's connected to your ancestry in some way. That's what I use. And I bless the thing. You set out the light. And then when you set fire to this fluid, a blue flame will appear on top of the fluid and dance. And it will be always in three. There will always be three blue flames, and they will form sort of like a pyramid. And if you concentrate on it, you will get ancestral knowledge. You will connect to your ancestors. Let me just shut the shade so you can see it better when I light it. All right, so here we go. So usually what I do is I'll take my little wand here. This is from Twisted Sage. And I will usually trace a crescent over it. And that starts the spirit flame. And can you see it?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll shut up now. You can see the magic of the blue flame.
Oh, totally.
And there's 3 points to it. I don't know if you guys can see it close there, but there are 3 flames, and they do form a pyramid. And the blue flame is so divine, it opens up dimensions. It opens up another consciousness. It connects with your DNA, your ancestors.
We can hear your daughter in the background. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, she's in the other room. And like I said, it's stated that as long as one person still carries this out, the inner mysteries will stay alive.
Keeping the flame alive.
Keeping the flame alive.
Now, is this good for purification and purifying your space? And
yes,
yeah, because I've actually done this before with alcohol.
Really?
Yeah, and I used a cast iron pan, and nearly set my head on fire.
You put too much in there.
A little bit, man.
So if you guys are gonna do it and you use a little bowl like I'm doing, always fill it up halfway.
I was a little aggressive.
Yeah, fill it up halfway, and it will. Has anything been coming to you at all? Have you?
No. I've just been listening to you and just kind of getting into the flame a little bit. What about you? Are you picking up anything here?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, that was interesting.
You can really see almost like three people dancing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if I can pick it up because it gets too hot, but I'm going to put it on this to show you, getting closer. It really is intense.
Let's see if we've got any people in the chat room here. What do we have? So that is gorgeous. Lit a candle 20 minutes ago. That is blue and has three wicks. There's a sync right there.
Yeah.
Somebody says get a session with you. It's life-changing. That's nice. Very cool. All right. I'm seeing twin flames here. That's what I'm seeing.
You're right.
I'm seeing
There's
twin
one smaller
flames.
one in the back.
Yeah. This is like a twin
Very
flame.
Strong. Wow. That is very strong. Right now it's two hardcore flames. Yeah.
Twin flames.
It's very interesting.
That's interesting, huh? Oh.
Well, that is the spirit flame.
I wonder if that's like me and you. I wonder if you and I are the two flames right now.
I do feel that. I was gonna say to you, and I wanted to talk to you later on because I do feel a lot of stuff coming to me, and it's about you.
Okay. Well, cool.
Yeah, there's something strong. There's something strong with that.
Well, I was definitely picking up on that twin flame imagery.
I'm getting a whole bunch of stuff right now.
All right. He's in the zone.
So yeah, so that's the spirit flame.
Beautiful. Well, thanks, Robert. That was both cool and hot at the same time.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to have you back on again at some point.
Definitely.
Because we got a lot more stuff to cover, obviously.
I want to have you on my show soon too.
Yeah, well, let's do that, man. We'll tag team and just keep this flow going.
Definitely, buddy.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, and you have a wonderful day. And for people that want to check you out, the Eye of Ra radio show, which is over on True Frequency on Saturday nights, and also your website, which is and by the way, he's a very talented composer and does electronic music, and I really like a lot of his stuff. So
I play guitar, sing, everything. Yep.
Yeah. So Renaissance man from upstate New York. Thanks for being here, Ra. Have a great day.
I appreciate having me, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right.
Spiral out, buddy.
All right, bye. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen, for today's Friday FARcast. And hope you enjoyed my guest today, an emissary from the past, RA Castaldo. And we're on out of here. I'll be back on Sunday night with the Friday FARcast. I'm sorry, the 11th house. And tomorrow, I did a really good conversation with Freeman yesterday. So I'm going to be on Freeman TV tomorrow. Check that out. It's pretty illuminating and great share with Freeman. All right. Hey, thanks for showing up. This is Robert Phoenix. You can find me at robertphoenix.com. And again, thanks to Ra for coming on over and sharing his culture and his past and his gifts and his talents and his wisdom. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.